Hi, Peggy, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's going to be an exciting interview with your career's been so inspirational to all of us, so I'm really looking forward to this. And I guess the best place to start is, how did you get interested in space? But not only just how you got interested, but how did you stay interested? Because I think some of the issues surrounding STEM field is people losing interest, maybe losing their confidence at their young teenage years. So what kept you engaged in it?
That's a great question. I grew up on a farm in Iowa, and when I was 9 years old, the first guys walked on the moon. And I thought, wow, cool job, I'd love to do this. I was also a Trekkie, so I thought, hey, this could be real, so I thought that's what I would like to do. Of course, I was in rural Iowa. I was a little girl. I didn't have any idea how to become an astronaut, but it was always part of my dream. When I graduated high school was the year the first female astronauts were selected, and among them were, of course, Sally Ride, but I was very interested in Shannon Lucid, who was a biochemist. I was very interested in biology and chemistry, and there were two medical doctors, so I thought life sciences would be something that I could do, and so it maintained my interest, and I always say that was a transition from a dream to a goal. Again, I had no idea how hard it would be to become an astronaut. I immediately after I got my PhD began applying to be an astronaut and was rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. So it was about 10 years before I was lucky enough to get selected as an astronaut. So there was a lot of determination involved in sticking with it. But I think in retrospect, I can look back at those 10 years and say that was the best 10 years because it prepared me to be a better astronaut. I always like to remind young people that, your path isn't always a straight line to get to your goal. And the things I learned during that time frame, in those 10 years working with the Russians and developing procedures and processes that were completely new as part of the Shuttle Mir Science Program, all of these things made me a better leader. And I think then made me qualified to be selected as the first female commander of the International Space Station and the first female chief of the astronaut office. So that was, I always like to think that time frame, even though I wasn't at my goal, I was still pursuing my goal. And I think that's good advice that all of us should remind young people, that you don't always make it immediately. You've got to strive and learn from the things that you're doing along the way.
I think determination, hard work, positive attitude are all important ingredients. When it comes to getting more people engaged in STEM, what do you think we need to do as a nation, and even companies like Axiom Space, how can they be involved?
Well, companies like Axiom Space having intern programs, providing mentors. I think having mentors and seeing other people doing things that you might be interested in is extremely important. So, encouraging your companies to have mentorship programs with young people is a great thing. It just exposes people to new opportunities and ideas. And I think that's the most important thing, is so many young people are raised in this, like me, in this very small world, and you have to expand and open their eyes to what's out there.
Yeah, I agree. And then speaking of Axiom, I just wanted to see if you wanted to comment on the recent X2 mission and the results it's having in terms of science and low Earth economy. Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Axiom 2 mission was designed to demonstrate not only that we could send private astronauts to the International Space Station to conduct research, but we also sent government astronauts. So we sent 2 Saudi astronauts, a male and a female, so those first Arab female to orbit the Earth and fly in station. And so it was really exciting to open it up to not only private citizens, but also to government astronauts. And that's actually Axiom's goal, is to expand opportunities in space, not just for countries and organizations, peoples, individuals, but for scientists to get access to space and develop and do more research in space. Part of the reason I joined Axiom was because of that long-range goal of Axiom Station, initially attached to the International Space Station. It's going to be able to do commercial research, and one module will actually be a research and manufacturing module. And after doing all this research on board the International Space Station over the years, it's exciting to me to think about actually taking the next step in commercializing space, that platform, as a way to develop new pharmaceuticals, superconductor crystals, whatever it is that we can expand and develop in space.
Do you think there's enough room for multiple private air stations?
Yeah, I do think there'll be a lot of opportunities for different space stations. Everyone's going to have slightly different objectives. I think Axiom serves as a great transition to help open up that commercial market. We literally have the forward port of the International Space Station, so we are a good transition point as we begin building our station. Then prior to re-entering the International Space Station, we'll separate and have an independent station. But that transition from all government to commercial stations, I think Axiom is poised to be the literal bridge between these two.
And the first module I read is scheduled for 2026. Is that still?
That's correct. That's correct.
Wonderful.
We're really excited about it. We've been working on developing all the new systems that we're going to add in, and it's exciting for me because I get to use some of my expertise of being in space. We've got these great young and excited engineers, and we've got a lot of the folks that had worked at NASA on the previous station, so we know the things that work and the things that we need to change. and it's really fun group to work in as we are developing new technologies and new systems to try and make our station a true advancement.
Yeah, you get to go back to all those times you might have thought, what would I change about this station?
Yes.
That you've been operating
They
on?
ask that all the time, and you're like, wow, you kind of have to step back because you're like, well, I just had to suffer through before, so now what would I really like to change? So it is exciting to think about different ways to design and develop it. Primarily, my big thing was, cabling. We got to have it behind the panels, It's just too obtrusive in the space volume of the International Space Station. And that's just how the experiments were designed initially.
And I imagine the same applies to lunar suits, which Axiom is developing that for the first woman to walk on the moon. So I imagine you have a lot of things you might want to have changed about spacesuits, too.
Yeah, having done 10 spacewalks in 2 different types of spacesuits, I really am excited working with the Axiom engineers on coming up with a suit that's going to have a lot more functionality for smaller builds, and hopefully just functionality in general. And I'm excited about that process. And
to me, that acquisition is particularly interesting because it's another case where NASA's playing a different role. They're more of a partner with the provider. They're buying the product as a service, not a product. How is that working relationship going? Is it evolving and challenging in any way?
I definitely think it's an evolving process, but I think space in the future is going to be much more of this collaborative work with different companies doing different aspects of the missions. Space is very expensive, but we can make it happen a lot easier if we add in the commercial components where we're trying to reduce costs and get new and innovative ideas going on. So,
is both parties, like especially on the NASA side, are they really making that transition to being a partner and letting go of requirements, wants, and things like that?
Everybody has to make changes, and I think that's really one of the great things about what we're doing with NASA now, with these joint missions, the AX-1 and AX-2, and then the future AX-3 next year, early next year. It's developing those methods of working together that I think is very important, and we're definitely establishing new protocols and procedures on both sides to try and optimize what we'll have in the future.
And going forward, as the government's making this grand transition to be more of a partner in space, less of an innovator itself and relying more on the innovation of the commercial side, Do you see other long-term challenges with that, or do you feel like they're making a successful transition?
Well, I think always the biggest challenge is education, making sure that people know what's available out there. For instance, for the research and manufacturing, we need to educate people on what research has shown us over the years during NASA's International Space Station, and how we can potentially expand and make it into actual products in space. Use that lack of gravity as a tool that you don't have down here.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Peggy.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you.